Your Creative Push, episode 22.
They're showing a little path. Just run down that path as fast as you can to just find the root of where it comes from.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Alex Cherry. Alex is a LA-based digital artist who blurs the lines between art and design. He draws his inspiration from music, film, and pop culture to make stunning images that will always make you think. And Alex, your latest piece, Starman, a tribute to David Bowie, is just wow. Can you kind of tell us about that? Like, how did you get that inspiration?
Well, there is, thank you for that intro. There is an interesting story behind that because I did not intend to make that a David Bowie piece. It was something I'd worked on about a couple of weeks ago. And, it was one of those pieces that it came together very quickly. And therefore, I was almost frustrated with it. I couldn't really find a direction for it. And I had saved it in my kind of work in progress folder under the name Spacey. I had almost, it was like I was angry at it for being good. It was as if I wasn't even trying, and I just kind of, just spat it out. And I also, because emotionally it didn't register with me. I just thought it looks beautiful, and I have no idea necessarily what the story is. And so, I also knew it was eye candy. I knew that people would like it, but it needs to mean something for me in order to kind of have the confidence in it.
Mm-hmm.
And, 2 days later, after watching the Golden Globes, I hear that David Bowie's died. And I did another space picture 10 years ago that was called Voyager, which is based on Space Oddity, a very popular song by David Bowie, and one of my most popular pieces, actually, this Voyager piece. And so I posted that on my Instagram, and then I kind of immediately right after that, I thought, wait a second, Starman, David Bowie, and this is him. He's ascending it back into space, into heaven. It's the first line on his new record is "Hello from Heaven." He had planned this record, and I just thought, man, this is the emotional kind of story that I needed to connect with my own work before I was able to release it. And then I gave it the title, Starman, just purely from happenstance of David Bowie.
Do you ever find that happens often? Like the actual meaning of it doesn't quite come to fruition until you get that moment where you're like, oh wow, this is why I kind of have been doing that.
Yeah, I would say often is almost an understatement. It's extremely, it's all the time. And it's always these pictures that kind of take the least amount of effort that resonate the most for me. And other people, I get the most response from images that I seem to have spent the least amount of time on. And that can be a very frustrating thing, but but hey, don't fight it if people like it.
Yeah, that kind of goes with the whole, like, don't force it. Sometimes, like, the greatest things come almost from somewhere else, it seems. I don't know, I get that sometimes.
Well, there's a concept of that I could talk about for just hours, but it's I call it art versus design.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to necessarily narrow down which is which, but it does, the roots of them seem to be that art is something that is like a performance, and it's something the artist generally does for themselves. So, when somebody's playing guitar, they're doing that. It's fun. They're doing it because they enjoy it. And then we can watch them do that, but they're not necessarily doing it for you. the need to play guitar comes. It's masturbatory. It's I'm doing it for me. It's fun.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
design, it's not like that at all. It's like I'm doing this for you. I'm building. Here's a hotel. Here's a city. Here's a phone, a computer, a car, whatever. I mean, there's things that. And then what's also interesting about design is that it's not fun to watch. We want to watch people play guitar, but we don't want to watch Jonathan Ive design an iPhone. Here's the best designer in the world working for Apple. He's amazing. He's the Michael Jordan of design, but we've never seen him work. We don't even know
Right.
what
That's yeah,
his desk looks like. We don't
yeah.
watch design the way that we watch, Picasso or an artist perform.
I don't know. It's interesting because it's almost like this like inner thing. Like if you kind of tap into that thing where you're doing it for yourself, it's kind of like you push away like everything else, like
Yeah.
all the other eyes that could potentially watch it. If you kind of ignore that and just only think about doing it from your heart and your brain and like where it kind of comes from, if you can do that, then put it out in the world. It's more pure. I don't know if pure is the right word, but it's like it
Well,
comes from that.
people can tell. They
Yeah,
somehow
yeah.
know.
Can tap into that.
There's an intuition. There's a barometer. Could be like some kind of fifth dimensional thing. Who knows? It's just they can definitely tell. I mean,
I think it's fifth dimensional.
maybe sixth. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, I believe in that. Um, Kind of going along with that, you use music, right? Like you say that music is one of your biggest inspirations as far as your art. Can you talk
Absolutely.
about that a little bit?
Well, you talk about motivation, how to stay motivated and pursue your creativity, whatever calling that is that you have. I think the best way to do that is to lean on what you know. Play to your strengths, path of least resistance. And I, like many, many, many people, listen to music all the time. I love music. And for me, looking to be an artist, it was a very easy thing to do to kind of to piece something together and then find a song to connect that to, as if I'm like a music video director, just kind of saying,
Mm-hmm.
oh, hey, this would be fun to do,
Mm-hmm.
this song makes me think of this kind of image, and I'm interpreting songs into images. And that's how I started. And it was a great way to start because I had endless music that I was listening to and endless inspiration. And 12 years later, my process is a little bit different. I can kind of stand on my own 2 feet. So I make the images and then connecting them to the song, kind of like this David Bowie piece, is kind of an afterthought. It's become a
Mm-hmm.
thing now. It's just consistent and it's still fun, but I don't necessarily look to the music first anymore, whereas I used to look to the music first.
To kind of give you like scaffolding almost.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's my
Yeah.
script. I'm the
Yeah, that's
director,
cool.
and the music is the script.
Very cool. What could you take us back to like maybe one of the first times that happened, or even further back to like one of your first creative moments?
Well, first creative moments when I was a child, I would just draw cartoons and um, just typical kid stuff, Ninja Turtles and
Yes.
He-Man and whatnot. And then it was, of course, I was a child of I was born in the '80s and grew up in the '90s, and that was a time when Japanese anime became a thing and really like took the world by storm. I think the '90s period of anime was like incredible with
Yeah.
Akira and Ghost in the Shell, Ninja Scroll, and these.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, like Nintendo was still the king of video games, and
Dominant.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then Pokemon and all this stuff. And um,
Mm-hmm.
when you think about how many characters, by the way, Nintendo has that we recognize and value, I think that's just incredible. That just one company came up with that many characters.
Yeah, they're doing their own thing.
Yeah, and so I started drawing those, and again, it's like we have this notion of like leaning on something. So as a kid, I was just like, whatever TV show or film I was watching, I would just draw that, and then it's actually the same thing. So then I became a teenager, and I went to art school, and they told me I sucked. And then I started learning Photoshop. I taught myself Photoshop, and it was an excuse to design something. I didn't have a job. I was 15 years old, and it was an excuse to design something. I would listen to, Nine Inch Nails,
Mm-hmm.
or even Linkin Park and stuff. And I was just listening to
Yes, I
whatever.
love Linkin Park.
Yeah, yeah, the stuff that I loved at that time, and it was an excuse to make something,
Mm-hmm.
and just use whatever excuse you have to do it.
And well, I can totally relate because Ninja Turtles. I was born in '85. I think you were born in '86,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we
Yeah, same generation.
we had the same thing. I had got the Nintendo, and yeah,
By the
Super
way, I mean,
Mario is my hero.
Ninja Turtles that's a design masterpiece. I mean, that's also Japanese
Mm-hmm.
property, but the way that they each had an individual color like that, and they're named after these Renaissance artists, and that's design in power.
Yeah, like who thought of that? Like, let's have some
Yeah,
mutant turtles,
yeah.
and we'll call them after artists, and there'll be a rat that kind of leads them. That's their sensei.
Why is that still a thing?
I don't know, because it's awesome.
And why? I'm not saying that in a critical
Yeah.
way. And why, you know, can Westerners why we can't think of anything that people give a
Original.
damn about? It's like, I don't know. We have Peanuts, you know,
Yeah.
and like
Boring ass peanut.
and Toy Story, which is like those are
Yeah.
good, but I
Yeah.
mean, you think of just the culture of Japan and all the different things that they've launched. This tiny little country and all these different properties they've launched, these different characters that we know and relate to. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just staggering. I mean, how much they've contributed versus how much almost the rest of the world, like no other single country, I think, comes close.
Do you think that's based on the population as a whole, or just like some of like what they value, like to start with,
Yeah,
or like
they
what kind of
value
projects get
how
lost
they
or launched? I
their
mean,
perspective. They have a
yeah.
deep understanding of culture, whereas, and I think Europeans have a pretty good understanding of culture, and America, because it's a younger country, has pretty much not a very good understanding of culture. Hence, the lack of characters, the lack of emphasis on design that this country has. We're still learning. I don't view that as like, I'm not just poo-pooing it and saying, oh, America sucks. Or I just think that it's just a very young country, and we're still figuring it out. You know,
What would you suggest to somebody that like kind of wants to go against like that idea, or like tap into like you said, the Japanese, like that kind of idea, and like that kind of where they hold that as a high value? What would you suggest to somebody living like in the United States that lives in a culture where that doesn't quite?
well, that's if you live in the United States, you probably live in a culture that doesn't cultivate design. Just as a large part of the world doesn't necessarily care because they're just too stressed out. Um,
Right.
I would say that, first, you live in a really great time because we have the internet and Tumblr and and many different, Instagram, whatever. Um,
DeviantArt.
DeviantArt, where I started. I would say just immerse yourself in it and don't be afraid to take inspiration from it. Be ruthless about that. Have
Ruthless, I like
no
that.
shame. Yeah, I think that the creative world is you think of it as the exact opposite of the real world. So in the real world, I'm going to be like, I just want to be. I don't have to force I want to be polite to you. I want to be nice to you. I want everybody. You know what I mean? But in the creative world, it's like I do the exact opposite. I'm brutal. You know what I mean? I'm like Donald Trump or something in the in the creative world. I just want to dominate. You know, it's like full on
Yeah.
like just and no manners. You know what I mean? You don't be polite in the creative world. You punch people in the face. You know, and because that's how we register emotionally with work. I think that's a really important part of the process is to be really emotional. If you look at
Hmm.
the artists who resonate the most with people, there's something deeply emotional about it.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with the idea of I think like I don't want to. I'm not trying to talk shit on Americans here, but like
No,
I think we have like
we
a
need to
lot of
grow.
times too much. Yeah, we have too much of a filter too. Like especially I don't know. I think
Referring to political
like
correctness.
no, I'm talking about with like creative juices and like people who are struggling, I should say.
Hmm.
Look at like an artist an artist like you.
Hmm.
Think any artist, and they're like, wow, like how do they do that? And I think it's like a lot of it has to do with just being brutally like honest and being like just putting yourself out there. Like, and I think a lot of people are afraid of, what other people will think,
Hmm.
or that their views won't be found with agreement, like that people will kind of like not make fun of them, but like they won't find like a kind of community.
Hmm. Well, that's why we have this new kind of generation. You know, we have the Kanyes who will kind of they're the ones that are braving this new. You know, what I mean? They're showing the way. Like there's, you know, he's such a polarizing guy, by the way. But that's an example of how that's a generational thing. I think the younger generation, there's almost no question about their support for a guy like Kanye, who's
Hmm.
totally he is so he's just so vulnerable and like he's exactly what you just said where he is
Yeah.
just himself all the time and everybody's there to criticize him and everybody's there to you know and that's the future of our world is this kind of transparency. You know, Bret Easton Ellis, who's a great writer.
Yeah, I love his he has a great podcast,
Yeah.
by the way, too.
First
Yeah.
episode was Kanye of his podcast.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
um he has this thing, was it post Empire? He calls it
Hmm.
post Empire. And well, during the Empire phase, you know, when a band like U2 would have been really when U2 in the 80s was at their apex. Mystery was your ally. Mystery was something that people valued. You know, Prince walks into a party and he's got his glasses on and nobody has any idea who he is, like what's going on with his life. He doesn't. He's like larger than life. You know, David Bowie. Can you imagine
Yeah.
David Bowie reading his email in the morning? Like you can't. You know, he's like a
Can't
deity.
ever. Yeah.
Uh, so that at that time, mystery was this thing that people valued. But post Empire, which Brett calls today's world, post Empire, it's the opposite. We value, and what the future will value because of our technology and the way privacy and the world has just changed. We want to see transparency. We want to see what your bathroom looks like. We want to
Hmm.
see what your the home screen on your iPhone looks like. We want to see
Mm.
what icons you have on your desktop. You know, like everything. We want to know exactly what music you're listening to. You know what I mean? Everybody's
Yeah.
got a mixtape. Everybody's publishing playlists, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like we want to know what kind of toothbrush you like, and and Kanye's like this kind of first generation artist who's he married to? It's Kim Kardashian. The same thing, I mean, how is she so successful? Um, that's a huge debate, but there's one thing for sure. There's a certain amount of transparency associated with her brand. I mean, you've seen her do everything. I mean, you've seen her do more things than a lot of your friends.
Yeah, and I think they also. I mean, she came from. I mean, she has famous parents, but she's most popular from her television show, which is exactly like you said. It's a look into literally everything she does.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of
Which is
people like
putting
can tap
yourself
in.
out there, literally.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people can tap into like that voyeuristic type of view of things, because everybody kind of does it. Like literally everybody puts, well, not literally everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So many people put so many unnecessary things on Facebook, like very unimportant status updates, and let
I think what
everything
you'll
know.
notice about, I'm sorry to cut you off, but
No, you're good.
what you'll notice about that is how it's always about Donald Trump. It's always about this law and this person. It's like they're posting things that are so separate from themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really like, hey, wait, who are you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people are scared to put themselves out there and to look in the mirror. It's really hard to look in the mirror and say, I'm going to make a change. This isn't working for me. I need to do X, Y, Z.
How would you suggest that they like bring that kind of into themselves, instead of like talking about something like Donald Trump, or like something that's like kind of
Safe
outside of them?
and not part of it.
Yeah.
That's a difficult one. I always like to lead by example. I mean, that's like Gandhi, right? He said, "Be the change you want to see."
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Great quote.
yeah. So I think a great way to because it's really kind of impossible to change somebody's perspective or to mold people into the way it's kind of not, even if you're doing it for the right cause or whatever, it doesn't really work. You can't just tell an alcoholic to stop drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One thing you can do though is sort of that I find is like this reverse kind of psychology thing where I just kind of just indulge it. Follow their thread, follow their, like, if they're showing a little path, just run down that path as fast as you can to just find the root of where it comes from. And it's like if it's manifested as, I hate Donald Trump, yada yada yada, and like this person is like a bartender in Philadelphia or something, and it's like they're
Mm-hmm.
totally separate from Donald Trump.
Right.
But just follow that path, and like you'll get to that root of like, you know, my dad hates me, or like whatever. You'll find that vulnerability if you just trace it back to its source and really indulge their behavior. So like it's the same with fears, right? Like the boogeyman. Like I'm afraid of the boogeyman in the closet. So what do? You just like leave the closet door open, or you know what I mean? Really embrace the closet as a thing, and then eventually, if you're smart enough, you'll just kind of forget about the boogeyman.
So once you kind of admit to yourself, okay, I'm afraid of the boogeyman, whether the boogeyman's Donald Trump or, whatever it may be, and kind of put yourself out there and like admit that you're afraid of that thing, and perhaps incorporate into your writing or artwork or whatever it may be, then how do you get the courage to once you've admitted that to yourself, to kind of like put that out there and admit it to the world?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if I have a one size fits all answer. I think that for me, it's been in the last few years, especially for me, it's been really helpful to kind of create a character, to sort of separate. You think of yourself as a superhero. That's right. That's what Batman does, right? He's Batman. And by the way, isn't that literally what he does? I mean, he took his fear of like bats and then became Batman.
But it is, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's literally what
The bats were his Donald Trump.
exactly right. That was like his like thing.
Yeah.
And so I would say, yeah, separate yourself. And okay, so I took acting class for a few years, and it was always
Recently or
no, it was
or
10 years ago. It was something
gotcha.
my dad wanted me to do. My dad was an actor, and he's a very good actor, and he always thought I could be a good actor. So he made a deal with me that I had to go to acting class, and he'd buy me a new computer.
Nice.
Which is like, I mean, looking back, I just think, man, I'm so spoiled.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's okay. I had that. If I took a college that I got a full ride to, they
yeah,
bought me a car.
yeah, exactly, right,
So
right.
I feel you, bro.
Yeah, and it's funny because at the time it like seems like a compromise.
Hmm.
Yeah, you look back and you go, geez, I learned so much in this acting class that it
Yeah.
isn't about acting. Um, and one of those things that I learned was that uh, I was always so confident on stage when I had the character, when I had the script or the story. If I was a drug dealer, I was so confident. I was on stage, I'd be like writhing around or like doing whatever or looking shady or tired or angry or something. But anytime I was on the stage as Alex Cherry, I was weird. I
Yeah.
was awkward. I wasn't charming. I wasn't charismatic. I was weird. I was not comfortable, and it showed. And I couldn't perform well unless I had this disguise on of like being somebody else.
I mean, I can relate to that as well. I created this Youngman Brown. That's not my real name. My real name's Michael Young. But when I started out, it was, I say it was for anonymity, like, because I didn't want to get fired from my job. But it's also like, because you can kind of put yourself in this separate kind of character, and you can kind of say whatever you want, and you can kind of say it differently than you would come out of your lips in real life. And
Exactly.
it's a powerful kind of tool, and you can I think that it's not even like you're not creating a different persona. I think it's like you're creating this persona that you can step into as your full self and kind of get away from the ego that you have as Michael Young,
Yeah.
and you can be like, all right, this is Youngman Brown, and it's
The-
easier to
the
say what I
better
truly think
version
in this.
of
Yeah.
yourself.
Michael Young 2.0.
Exactly right. And I also think that it's great. Like what they say with fashion is to find like a style icon. So you go find a celebrity or someone you like, or and just kind of just look at what they're doing,
Yeah.
and then sort of ghost that. And then what's funny is that every time copying is that's something that we have to get over, by the way. This judgment of people who copy things, or you know because what's interesting about copying is that it never really turns out the same. Even if you copy a famous piece of art, it's not going to look exactly the same as the famous piece of art, and your version might even be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find sometimes when um, I'll just go to fashion because it's easy. But if I go to a store and I see, Zara's version of like a Kanye's shoe, and Kanye's shoe costs $2,000, and the Zara version costs $40. But like the irony is that I might like the Zara version more. It's a copy of it, but it doesn't have any branding on it, which I always tend to gravitate towards. It has it's like a minimalist version of this other thing. And so I think, well, man, this is like a knockoff, but I like it more. So, well, with copying, that's how we learn. That's how we learn. We have to copy. It's just inevitable. You have to trace somebody else's steps. It's how we learn to speak. It's how we learn as humans. It's something that it's necessary. And I think the best way to launch a creative career is to copy and copy those who you love. And it's really that curation of who to copy. It's people will respond to who you copy. That becomes its own thing. You start to look at other people's palettes of who they copy, and it becomes an amalgamation of who they are.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and it's been something that like a lot of people that I've interviewed have talked about, and especially Gwen Siemel. She is a portraitist who her big thing is uncopyright, and she like is a complete advocate. Like none of her work it's all on the Creative Commons. Like
That's excellent. A lot of my work is like that as well.
so she's taking that stance because she thinks that copyright, and I agree. It's a scary thing though, like especially when you're putting yourself out there to like be available to just be used freely.
That scary.
Well, it's scary for me so far, but I totally agree that like all art is imitation. It just all of it is you're taking from everything that you yourself have seen, and you're kind of putting that, like you said, like you make your own palette, like it's like a little buffet of all the things that interest you, and then you put that out there, and then you're going to become part of somebody else's palette too. It's just
exactly. And how how would we ever have Chipotle if somehow, Taco Bell had copyrighted rice and beans. You know what I mean? We kill. I think that's a part of America's thing where we have to learn that. I think we're the proprietors of copyright, really, right? It's in America that people are sue happy, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we haven't learned is that we're not. That's sort of like weed killer. Like you're sort of killing all the grass in your lawn, by accident by putting too much. What is that? Poison, that whatever.
Yeah.
We're not fertilizing. We're just you're just killing our lawn, and so uh, it doesn't cultivate a healthy culture.
And that's where we're ending part 1 of my conversation with Alex Cherry, because it's time for you to go do work. You shouldn't be listening to podcasts all day. But as a bonus, I am going to put part 2 tomorrow on Saturday. This is a 5-day-a-week podcast, so you get a little bonus episode. You don't have to wait till Monday to listen to the conclusion of my conversation with Alex Cherry, which was awesome. I couldn't imagine making you wait until Monday. So much good stuff tomorrow. So if you're not subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm not going to do any ratings and review shout outs today. I'm just going to sign off and let you go do work. Hopefully you're inspired today. And if not, tune back in tomorrow because I promise you that you will be. Thanks so much for listening and have a great day. I'll catch you tomorrow.